So this is supposed to be HTTP status, not HTTP response. So I'm gonna copy this and paste it here and make it lowercase. So HTTP status, not HTTP response. So the next method we have to add is to delete a user. So I'm gonna create another mapping to delete mapping, and I'm gonna give it the path of delete like this, and then I need to get the ID of the user. So in that case, we're gonna make this a path variable and we're gonna call it ID. And now for the method, so public, of course, it's gonna return a response entity, and it's gonna return a response entity of HTTP response, right? So we're gonna formulate a response with using our class. Now let me make sure you guys remember. So remember, we created this class, right, to return an HTTP response to the user. So we're gonna make this method return an HTTP response. So HTTP response, okay, and it's gonna be delete user. And then of course, since this is a path variable, we're gonna do something similar to this. I'm gonna copy this, paste it here, and this is gonna be the ID. So this name right here and this one right here, they have to match, and this is gonna be ID. So if you remember, if we go back to the service real quick, the ID is a long type, so we have to make this a long type, and this is gonna be the ID. Oh, not here, right here. So I need to delete this ID and ID, okay? So that way we can pass in the ID to the method. And of course, all we have to do is call the user service.delete, and then we pass in the ID like this. So you can see that the delete doesn't return anything. It's a void, right? It returns void, which means it doesn't return anything, which is why we have to make this return our custom response. And this guy is gonna do that for us. So we're gonna do return, and this response, oops, this response right here. And then here we have to pass in okay, that everything was successful. Otherwise, it's gonna be catching the exception handling class. And then here we can pass in another string, say user deleted successfully, something like that. And then we semicolon here, and we can introduce a new constant for this, user deleted successfully. I guess that's good enough. Okay, so that way we can return our custom response to the user. As you can see, this is returning a response entity of type HTTP response in the body. Next one we need is to actually, well, there's one last thing I need to do. I'm gonna just do it and then I'll explain it. So here I want to do a pre-authorize, right? So I'm gonna do pre-authorize, and then here I'm gonna pass in a string, and I'm gonna do as has, oops, not this. So has authority, and then here I'm gonna pass in a string, which is gonna be user, and then delete. So if I go back into the configuration, you remember I put in this enable global method security pre-post enable to true. So this is gonna allow us to set security at method level. So because we have this annotation in here on the configuration file, we can actually have this pre-authorized here. That's what it's doing. So all I'm doing here with this line is for someone to be able to delete a user, which in our case, we're gonna treat as a very important functionality, right? We want this person to have the user delete. And if we go back to the to our constant class and we go to the authorities, you can see if you're not a super admin, which means you're gonna have super admin authorities, they're the only one with the delete. So you will not be able to delete. So if you're anything else, you're a user, or HR, a manager, or even an admin, a simple admin, you won't be able to delete a user. You have to be a super admin to be able to delete a user. As you can see, I'm saying, hey, as long as they have this permission, then allow them to delete. And let's go back in the resource, and you're gonna see how this is gonna come into play, and we're gonna test this. You're gonna see that when I'm using a user who doesn't have the user delete permission, they won't be able to call this. This won't execute. When you try to execute it, it's going to say not enough. You don't have enough permission. Okay, so you can see how this is very, very important and very granular. Like you can have it at different level. Now, the next thing is to have another method to actually update the user profile. So I'm just gonna see if I can copy a post. It's a big one, but I'm still gonna get it anyway. So down here, we're gonna do this, and this is gonna be update profile image. So profile image, and I'm gonna call it the same, the method the same thing. So update profile image. So this is gonna be a post request, and it's gonna return a user. So here, I need to get the let me remove the first one. Okay, so I'm gonna get the username. So I'm gonna remove these two as well, the username, and I also need the image. So I'm gonna remove all of these other ones as well. And now I'm gonna remove the required because it's required now. You know, I can't update the image without the image. So here I'm just gonna do this. So as you can see, I'm taking in the username, which we need, and the profile image, which we need, and we're making it required, which means we remove the required. By default, it's true. So I'm gonna remove this line and remove this user in there for now because I don't want to see this red user. And then what I have to do is to call the update profile image. So I know this method returns a user, so I'm going to create a new user, and then I'm going to call the user service update profile image, and I'll pass in the username and pass in the profile image. That's simple. And then here, return the user and the body. Okay, so that's all we have to do. We can just call this directly and then update the user profile image. So let's implement this method. So this is going to return, right, response entity of HTTP response, which we're specifying here, as you can see here. So I'm going to add the diamond, and in here we're going to have it return everything that this has in it. So if they pass in this HTTP status of OK, then we're going to pass in the value of OK, the HTTP status OK, the reason phrase of OK, and whatever message that they pass in here. So you remember, when we're sending this response back, we need a body, right? And then we need an HTTP status, which is gonna come from here. As you can see, you can go into this class. So it's gonna be like either, let's search for OK. You can see it's gonna be OK or created or whatever the case might be. So let's go back here. Actually, I just remembered. So for the delete right here, we're not gonna send OK. Let's send a 204 no content, okay? Because no content, so all the 200 range are success. So we're gonna send in this 204, which means there's no content. There's nothing to return. Okay, just to be specific. So here, instead of OK, we're gonna return no content. Okay, so let's import this. Static import for HTTP status from Spring. Okay, so no content. When they delete this, it's going to be no content is a 204. Okay, so for here, let's go back here. Let's finish this. So we will send in the body in the response entity, the body and the HTTP status. So here's the HTTP status. So we're going to pass in the HTTP status, right? And then for the body, it's going to be an HTTP response, which is our custom HTTP response. So we're just gonna do new HTTP response. And you remember we have a constructor. So if you go back in here, you can see it takes the HTTP status code, the HTTP status, the reason, and the message, right? So let's go back here. You remember the message. We have the message. And let's go back. We need the status code, HTTP status, and the reason phrase. So here's this HTTP status. So the first thing is the status code. So HTTP status, that's value. That's going to give us the status code. Next one, if you remember, if we go back for a minute, it's the actual HTTP status, right? Which we already getting here. So after the HTTP status code, we pass in HTTP status. What's the next one? The next one is the reason phrase. So here we're gonna pass in HTTP status that get reason phrase, and we're gonna transform this to uppercase. So to uppercase, and I'm gonna put this on a no line. And the last thing we need is the message, which we get here. And I'll get this message right here, and also pass this in as uppercase, and we're done. And this has to be nil, like that. Okay, so I wanted you to, because this can look a little bit confusing. So all of this represent the body, okay, which is a new HTTP response instance, okay, and then we pass in the status code for the response entity. As you can see, the user is then the body and the status code. So the status code here is this, and the body in this case is user, in our case is this whole thing. We could put this on a separate line. So for instance, we can do body like this, and then here we can just do HTTP response, and then body, and then we do this like this. It's the same thing, right? You can see if that makes more sense, right? So in the body, it's going to be HTTP response of whatever status that they pass in here with the message, and then we pass it in here. But we don't need to do this. That's just redundant. So I'm just going to remove it. Just going to put it on one line, just like that. Okay. So just so you're not confused by this method right here and what it's doing. So we're going to continue in the next lectures.